In this little video, I'm going to show you how to do an overcast stitch. It's this one here, overcast. And it's also fairly simple, and in some respects uses almost identical technique to the running stitch. It's just through, needle going through fabric. But there is a key difference. Here's an example of what a finished overcast stitch looks like. And you'll see that it's actually going over the edge of my little bit of felt here, all the way over. This type of stitch has a few different functions. The first thing you can use it for is to join together two bits of fabric, just like you can use a running stitch or a back stitch. So I could, for example, use this type of stitch to join together the edges of two bits of felt. And later, when we make our little Christmas decorations, we are actually going to use an overcast stitch for that exact purpose. The other thing that an overcast stitch is really good for is stopping a piece of woven fabric from fraying. So you can use it to reinforce a seam. Now, there's a few words in there that I haven't introduced you to, so don't feel like you have to memorise them yet. We'll get to that point. Felt doesn't fray, but a lot of fabrics do. The fabrics, for example, that your school uniform dresses and shirts are made out of is probably a poly cotton poplin. And if you didn't reinforce the edges of the fabric, they would start to fray, particularly as you put them in the washing machine again and again. So that's the other thing that an overcast stitch is good for if you're hand sewing, is to stop or reduce the amount of fraying that you get from the edge of woven fabric. Let's look at how we make this stitch. This one's quite big, and as we get better at this, it's good to be able to make this stitch really small and neat, particularly when we're making our Christmas decorations. I've got another example here of one that looks a little bit smaller. So that's just a little bit smaller again. Okay, here's my thread. I'm going to start just by working this on a single piece of felt, and then I'll show you how it goes on two pieces joined together and what the effect of that is. So here we go. So there was my knot on the back. So far, exactly the same as running stitch, same action. But this time, instead of going that way, I'm deliberately going to go over the edge and come up like that. So over the edge and up like that. Now, I've probably done something here that has made it all a bit trickier. And that's that I've started from right and I'm working to left. Let me just take a stitch over this side. And I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So I'm going to go, so I'm just going to use my thumbnail to make sure the thread stays where I want it to, and that I don't make little loops. You can work this one in any direction you like. The direction is up to you, so long as you practice over time, getting better at making each little stitch as neat as you possibly can, the same distance from the one next to it, particularly if you're going to use this stitch on something that is visible. So has a decorative function or is just part of the decorative features of the thing you're making, which will be true of our Christmas decorations. And that'll make a little bit more sense in a minute. The other thing to be careful of with this type of stitch is to not pull it too tightly. I'll show you what happens when you do pull it too tightly. You get this kind of effect. Oh, that actually looks quite nice. So you might decide that that's actually something you want to do. Look, it looks like little waves. More often than not, though, you'll find that it will gather the fabric, so squeeze it all together, and you actually don't want that to happen. Now, I'm going to add a second piece of fabric. So let's pretend that all along these two bits of fabric were joined. And I'm going to do an overcast over the two bits of fabric and join them together. Here we go, over, over, over. Oops. It's very easy to make these too big, too small. It takes a lot of practice to get them super even. So again, be patient, be kind to yourself. Know that this takes practice to get really right. So there's the overcast stitch worked on a single edge with a little bit of gather in the in the stitch, and here's the overcast stitch worked across two thicknesses. Sometimes you'll find, you look back over your work, see this one's a little loose. It's just, this one's sort of, yeah, this one's nice and tight, and this one is kind of in between, and this one's a bit floppy. So what you can do is get the tip of your needle, just go back, give them a really gentle little tug to even up all the tensions. And again, if this is something that's going to be seen, it's really nice to get it looking as beautiful as you can. How do you finish this? Well, it's same but different. If this is an exposed bit and you don't want the knot to be seen, then you want to do what's called burying the thread end, and if you can, bury the knot as well. Pardon me. I'm going to do a little knot, and I'm going to try to make it as unobtrusive as I can. So I'm going to go through my loop and then there. So I've done my little thing, and then I'm going to try to wriggle the knot all the way. Actually, let's leave it right in the centre of the hole. So where the two bits of fabric join together. So can you see I've got that little lump of the knot? This is the thing that will make the knot less obvious. And the better you get at this, the more you'll be able to wiggle the thread to get the thread to disappear completely. Instead of, that's a knot there, and I could just cut that. And it wouldn't fall apart, but it wouldn't look very pretty either. Instead, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go back into my work, just hiding that. Can't see the needle on either side. I'm going to bring the needle up in any old place, somewhere in the body of my work. I'm going to pull that through and just give a little gentle tug so that the knot slips inside the join of the fabrics, kind of disappears. Now this has come out kind of in the middle of nowhere, which is perfectly okay, because I'm going to give it just one more gentle tug so that I've gathered that a tiny bit, and then I'm going to snip that really close to the edge. And then when you untug it, oh, look, it's gone. It's disappeared. It's buried, and if we look on the inside, you can just see the thread hanging around in there, but it's otherwise gone, and we haven't been left with a little rat's tail hanging out. So that's overcast stitch, and that's the stitch we're going to use for our Christmas decorations in just a bit.